welcome to Coffee with Cal. My name is Sheila. I'm the Learn International Study Abroad Coordinator. And today we have our guest, Kayleigh Nemeth, a student study abroad alumni who has done a couple programs abroad. How are you today, Kayleigh?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. Thanks for being here today. For those of you who are unaware, Cow is our Learn International mascot, and she travels everywhere we go. Coffee with Cow podcast aims to capture and share stories from study abroad alum and international educators. And like I said, Kayleigh's here to share her story. Kayleigh, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Kayleigh. Thank you for the introduction. I'm originally from Oregon on the West Coast, went to school in Boise State, Boise, Idaho, and I just moved out to the University of Florida after graduation to start my first career in international education. I'm super excited to be talking today about my time abroad. I've gone twice, as Sheila mentioned, once in 2016 for a summer program to Reggio Emilia, Italy, and then a second time in my junior year, 2018, to Växjö, Sweden. I work at the University of Florida International Center as a study abroad advisor. I've been there currently for about 8 months, so it's a pretty new position.
Oh, that's exciting. So you have studied abroad at your undergraduate degree, and now you work in international education. So you must have a lot to say and be passionate about in your current job. That's pretty exciting. Congratulations on the new position too. 8 months
Thank
in,
you.
I mean, you've witnessed a lot, especially during the current climate.
Yeah.
But before we talk about your current job, let's talk about your study abroad experiences. Tell us about your first one in Italy.
Absolutely, yeah. So I went to Italy kind of on a whim, honestly. I went to school and the first semester was not really what I expected it to be. So when I went home over winter, I had some big decisions to make about like whether or not I wanted to continue going to school or if I liked what I was doing. And I felt like the biggest thing I needed to do was get more involved on campus because I just was having a hard time making friends. Being out of state, it's hard to make friends when you don't know people already. So I just decided to jump all in. I joined a sorority and I went abroad, and going abroad changed my entire outlook on college and life. And I think I would definitely not be in the job that I'm in today without it. Obviously, it's a very big proponent of going into the field I went into, but talking about where I came from, I feel like where I first was in college to where I am now is just a lot of personal growth as well as physical growth, and like where I've actually moved and been in all the countries I've seen since then. So Italy was a 5-week program, which doesn't seem like much, but I feel like if you're introspective about it, you really learn so much. I studied comparative health, and then I studied Italian language, and I think just the immersion in a different culture really showed me like how laid back life could be like in another country, and it made me want to explore my opportunities a little bit more. I didn't realize how much I had available to me when I went to college. So when I returned after my study abroad, my one semester at school in the winter, I decided that I was going to change my major because I wanted to not limit myself to one, desired career field.
Interesting. So you studied abroad and with the specific major that you've already been taking courses with, and then you changed your major after that. So you said earlier that you studied abroad another time after you studied abroad a second time. So was that with the major that you changed to in your undergraduate program?
It was, yeah. It was a mixture. So when I studied abroad a second time, once I changed my major, I actually found out that I had some excess time in my schedule because the major that I had switched from just had a heavier course load. It was very science and health centric to more of like a interdisciplinary degree. And so I had a lot more excess time, and they were saying that I could either graduate a semester early or just take a semester off. And I said, what a perfect opportunity to get me to go abroad again. I didn't realize like how important that would be until after I came back from being abroad a second time. But it just seemed like it was meant to be in the way that they were like, you have an extra semester, just go for it. So I did go to Sweden for a whole semester, and I studied partially like fun courses and then partially environmental politics that went towards my environmental science degree.
Interesting. So your first time you did a 5-week program, and then you decided to study abroad a second time, which was a direct enrollment for a semester in a new country. Compare and contrast those two times abroad. I mean, timeline, they're different, but can you tell us anything else that was different or maybe even similar to those 2 times that you were studying overseas?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that they were incredibly different. I really don't think timeline has too much to do with it. I really encourage people to study abroad, like whether or not it's going to be for a summer or semester, because I think just getting overseas opens up a whole new world of different opportunities, different perspectives. So it is like interesting to compare and contrast, because when you're in a country longer, I feel like you get more opportunity to see like what's really considered culture, whereas if you're there shorter, like you sometimes see like the touristy culture.
Mhm.
But because I was in an intensive Italian class in Italy, I got to see so much in such a short amount of time. And I honestly think seeing it all in such a short amount of time really changed like a lot, because I didn't think that I could learn so much in 5 weeks. But we went to local markets and talked in Italian to local Italians. We went to restaurants to order in Italian. Our teacher was from the region. She was from a town that was about 30 minutes away from where we were living. And so she just had a lot to tell us about her life. And we would compare and contrast that in class to our life. I think what also made it really special is that the class I was in was only 5 or 6 American students. So it was a very close relationship between the students and the professor that really allowed us to like dig deeper into like cultural differences, as well as just like learning the language a little bit more one-on-one, which I feel like in contrast to Sweden, I didn't really learn a lot of the Swedish language. Most of what I learned picking up from other Swedish friends, because most of the population in Sweden actually speaks English. About 80% of the population speaks English. So even in the town I was in, all of the grocery stores, like all of the cafes, like pretty much everyone spoke English. Any restaurant I went to, I never had an issue. They learn it pretty on when they're like in primary school. So for them, like they really appreciate their Swedish culture and traditions, and I got to learn a lot more about that side of things, like midsummer, and all the different traditions they have, like with their holidays and how they celebrate those. But language-wise, it was a big difference. So I think seeing those 2 different sides of culture as well, like, was a big contrast, because in Italy, like, it's a very rich culture because they're very loud. In Sweden, they're more like reserved. So there is like such a difference in culture between them and the US, but between each other as well. You know, Sweden's in a colder climate up north, and Italy's pretty warm, like on the other side of Europe, you know, down below. So I think as well, just like seeing how different of a contrast from one European country to another, it just like encouraged me to continue traveling around Europe to see what other cultures were like as well.
It's really interesting. I could say I'm a little bit envious of your experience. And then I've never had experience studying abroad a longer term, like the direct enrollment you did in Sweden. And I feel like getting the experience to really submerge myself into like a routine that I would set myself in a country. So I feel like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, that you might have had that opportunity to just set your own day-to-day life routine in Sweden.
Absolutely. And I actually think it's kind of funny you mentioned that, because that's something I've been realizing a lot about myself lately, is that I'm really a big nester. I find a place and I like to make it my own, like almost immediately. And I feel like I try to do that the best I can in any situation. So I feel like I also did that in Italy, but you're right, the routine was so much different because I was in class every day and then I traveled every weekend. So I didn't really have a lot of time to like invest in finding like little coffee spots around town. In Sweden, it was a little bit different. The city that I was in was big, but it was wide, and it was pretty much snowy and icy the entire time. So traveling around was pretty limited. So my routine really got like compacted in the first month, because I had to figure out the closest grocery store, the closest restaurants, figure out where my bus stop was. But after that, when the weather started warming up and you could expand a little bit more, because I was so comfortable in like what I already knew, I was able to explore a lot more. And I realized like by the time I left, I still hadn't seen everything that I had wanted to see, because I was talking to some other students who, you know, I met probably at the beginning, but didn't start really hanging out with until later in the semester. And they had found this bread factory in a totally different direction of town that like I never knew about. And they would go every week and get fresh bread. And so, you know, I feel like creating a routine is good, and I really appreciated that I got to do that. But I also really appreciated like getting to know other people's routines as well, which is something that you normally can't do unless other people are there longer as well, because some people move at different paces for which they like to set like their own routines as well.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate that. I just feel like that experience alone can be life-changing. So definitely appreciate your perspective on a shorter study abroad experience compared to a longer study abroad experience. You mentioned earlier that you work in international education, and that is not what you did focus on in your undergraduate degree. Tell us what made you go in this direction.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, my original major was in health sciences, which is a very clear departure from where I am now. And after I went abroad the first time, I just like wanted more opportunities. I knew that if I went into the degree that I got, I'd pretty much only be able to do that for the rest of my life unless I went back to school. And I used to be like terrified of change and terrified of like messing up my plan basically. But when I went to Italy, like I said, I just had such a great experience with like seeing how they interacted with like their life and their culture, and like how much more slowed down it was, and how much more appreciation they had for like spending time with others, friends, family, like just out in the open. And I was like, I don't need to be on this like go track. Like the major I was in, it would have been pretty intense. I would have had to go to grad school and have a graduate assistantship right after undergrad. And I didn't really think I was ready for that. I still don't think I'm ready for grad school. So I think that it just made me realize like I need to like open up my mind kind of to like what else I can do. So the major I went into is interdisciplinary. I went into environmental science, but we learned a lot about just like sociology, anthropology, kind of different ways that people interact with their environment. So I also studied some culture, which I think slowly but surely led me to where I am now. Even if it's not exactly what I'm doing, I think that I definitely built a foundation a little bit more there than I could have in my previous major. But I did take a pretty big leap into this field. It's kind of a field that people fall into from all walks of life. So I wouldn't necessarily say that there's one major that you should get to be in the field. I think usually if you're continuing your education, your master's is a little bit more important to like relating it back. For undergrad, a lot of kind of like what gets you in is your experience. And I felt like I got a lot of that in Sweden. And when I went, I just like, Sweden's a little bit different. Like they do have some clubs on campus, but it's very hard to be in them if you're not living on campus.
Okay.
And housing in Sweden is pretty limited. Even Swedish, people who live in Sweden, like they have issues getting housing as well. And so for the international students, like we all had an apartment off campus that was reserved for us. So that was really nice, but it was, about 2 miles away. So I didn't join any clubs on campus besides like the International Student Club, which, I'm really appreciative of that because I got to travel a lot through that and meet other international students. But it did make me appreciate like being back home, how many opportunities I had to be involved. And I ended up joining the I ended up joining the Study Abroad Global Ambassador Program for my study abroad office.
Oh, wow.
And I started, assisting other students in their search to go abroad. And that's kind of what, initially sparked my interest. I got an email from my advisor. It was like, we're doing this program and you went abroad as an alum, like, would you be interested? So I applied. I was one of like 8 or 9 students that was able to, get into the program and kind of promote study abroad on campus at the student level. And along with that, like I was doing an internship at the same time. The internship was at a zoo in my college town. And it was originally what I was thinking I might want to do when I graduate, along with environmental science. Okay. And I think in comparison and contrast, like that internship and then my volunteering at the office, I got to see like which one I liked a little bit more. And I also hadn't really thought about international education as a career up until that point. So working with my study abroad advisor, and like she was getting her graduate degree and to be able to, continue working in international education, I was like, you can do that. Again, like I said, there's so many opportunities out there. It's hard to know them all unless you just like end up falling into the right place. I wish I had known earlier. I maybe would have tried a little bit harder to like get some better experience going into the field. But I think that where I ended up, it worked out really well for me because I did end up getting a job as a study abroad advisor. So I really I'm happy with where my path led me. And that I did find it, and it wasn't too late, but it was too late to change my major a second time. So I stuck with environmental science and I graduated with it. And I do still have a passion for environmental science. I very much so consider myself like an environmentalist. And I really try to implement stuff from that in my everyday lives. And I, do a lot of education with my friends and family as well. So I do still have that, but it's a really hard job market to be in right now as well. So I think the way I went, also right now, I mean, it's a hard job market for everyone, especially international education. But I think where I went, lent a little bit more to my passions and less so like my knowledge. But I've learned so much in the first 6 months, such a steep learning curve. I feel like you can never know everything, but I feel like I know like such an immense amount more that anywhere I went from here, like I have the tools I need to continue forward in the field now.
That's great to hear. I can relate so much to your story on how you discovered international education and where you are today. I too did not get my undergraduate degree in international education, and I'd love to hear how COVID-19 has affected you and your office, especially with you just joining. Congratulations! You now have been working there, I think you said, for 8 months, right? So I feel like it's still fairly a new position. So it's such a whirlwind of a time to be a part of international education. So I'd love it if you could share how it has affected you personally and also in the office.
Yeah, I mean, I think that its effect on the office is very similar to a lot of other places. We're all working from home, but I am like very appreciative that I do still have the opportunity to like be in the field and continue working towards like learning more, working on some special side projects. I think it's affected each of us a little bit differently in the office. We all have our different levels of like introvertedness and extrovertedness. And some of us like being home a little bit more than others. Some are itching to get back to the office already. I'm more of an introvert, so I enjoy being home. But I do know some of my coworkers are having a harder time with that. And I do have to respect that. Communication has been a little bit tougher because we can't just walk into each other's office. I feel like we're a very collaborative team. So having that taken away in this time has made it a little bit more stressful as well, because we're having the time to work on these projects that we've wanted to do for a while now. And, it's the perfect time to do it, except for the fact that it's hard to collaborate with other people to get those done. So doing a lot of Zoom meetings, mainly trying to stay positive. We do weekly check-ins, 2 or 3 times a week. So we're really like trying to continue to like hold each other accountable and just make sure we're like all on the right track moving forward. I think when we get back to the office, it's going to be like another big adjustment because we're all going to be used to being at home, kind of going at our own pace, making our own schedules. And, when we go back to the office, it will be summertime. So most likely, there won't be any students. So we're still going to have that time, I think, hopefully to adjust to, the same thing we're doing at home, just on campus. And then when the students come back, that's really going to, I think, make or break, like, whether or not we can make that adjustment. I do think like being in the field so little of time has really taken an effect on me. I was saying previously, like, I feel like I got a lot of experience in my first 6 months and I did learn a lot, but summer programs are like the most popular. Most students go abroad in the summer, and I went abroad in the summer, so I totally understand like where they're coming from. It fits better in most people's schedules than a semester does. And not being able to work with those students in those programs over the summer, I feel like I'm going to be missing a lot going into the fall, like a lot of experience and just a lot of, like working with students and hearing their like testimonials almost on their programs. And I was hoping to have that as a resource for me going forward. So I think a big adjustment is trying to figure out how to continue forward, not having this experience from the summer and being so new in the field. You almost need to, work a little bit harder towards next summer to make sure that you have that kind of in your, house of abilities. But I do think that our office is doing pretty well working online. I think that we are being extremely productive, despite, the time that we're in. And I think that what's going to come out of it is actually going to make our office a lot more student friendly. We're working towards catering towards the student a lot more in terms of like usability of our website and usability of our program search, as well as like our availability to students. Like we can obviously tell now that we can do things online, which has been a big, big shock for all of us. We're like, we can do this online, and like we previously thought we couldn't. And now that we can, I feel like we'll be much more accessible to those students. And we're working on a lot of databases and resources for students that I think that this time, like if we didn't have it, we wouldn't be able to work on that. So while it is a tough time, and like bringing students home was especially tough, like where we're going next, I think we're going to learn a lot from it. I think it will be hard in the fall or in the spring whenever we can get students abroad again. I think it's going to be a little hard for the first semester. People are going to be hesitant. People are going to be uncertain. But I do think that overall, like students love to travel. People love to travel. It's so accessible now that it's almost like a why wouldn't you travel? So I don't think that we're going to really lose any students in the field, but it is kind of a tough time to not be working with students. That's a primary like perk of the job, is getting to do advising appointments and talk to them and get them excited about doing something that you did. I mean, I know I'm excited about, I love telling students about where I went and like getting them excited about the same things, and getting them prepared as well, like for the mental and emotional journeys. Every student is different. Not everyone changes their major, but a lot of people actually do change their major. A lot of people go abroad twice. So having those connective points, I think that's a big perk for me. So it's been an adjustment in that way as well. But like I said, I think we're going to come out of it on top, which is good. The other thing I wanted to mention is like, it is hard bringing students home. I've been thinking a lot about like how I would have felt if I was in this situation. It was only 2 years ago. So I am the youngest in my office, and I'm the last person who went abroad as a student. So I think about where I would have been, and like if I would have wanted to come home, and how much that situation, how stressful that would have been. And it definitely makes you think a little bit more about like the time that you had, and like being grateful for it, because, I could have very easily had this happen and like had to go home and not had the full experience that I wanted with my semester abroad. So I think it's made me more grateful for my opportunities, and wanted to reach out more to students in the future to get them to have the same opportunities as well.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate your outlook on this horrible situation that the world is going through right now. A big word that's going around our office at Learn is just finding the silver lining in the current conditions. And I feel like your office and you personally have found a silver lining on what you're going through right now, and how can we make the best out of a horrible situation, and how can we move forward, how can we develop better programs, how can we reach out to students better. I mean, all that type of study abroad aspects of just improving your program in general. So that outlook is very, very motivational for anybody going through a hard time right now. Kayleigh, I really want to appreciate taking the time to talk with us and share your stories with Learn International. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's been great. Here at Coffee with Cal, we love to hear student stories about their experiences abroad. You can find this episode along with other episodes on our Learn International YouTube channel, and you can hear about all of these stories and the access to this episode with their social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn with the hashtag LearnINTL. And yes, thanks again, Kayleigh, and we look forward to more student stories and other director stories as well. And tune in, all the listeners, for our next episode. Thanks again, Kayleigh. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.